Hello, I'm Esther Githu. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. The United Nations Environment Assembly is meeting in Kenya to chart solutions to the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. 2 people were killed in Guinea's unrest linked to a nationwide strike. Among their demands, workers are seeking higher wages. And the World Health Organization says cardiovascular diseases are the #1 cause of deaths worldwide. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The United Nations Environment Assembly, known as UNEA-6, is meeting in Kenya this week to chart solutions to the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Juma Majanga reports from the UN Environment Headquarters in Nairobi.
Over 7,000 delegates from across the world, including heads of state, ministers, intergovernmental organizations, civil society groups, the scientific community, and private sector, are gathered here in Nairobi to discuss and shape global environmental policy.
There is no objection. It is so decided.
Founded in 2012, the UN Environment Assembly brings together all the 193 UN member states with the aim of fostering multilateral solutions to global environmental challenges. This is the 6th session of the Assembly.
Today, in 2024, the international community is looking to us to deliver. This is our moment to advance the global environmental agenda.
Previous UNEA meetings have produced more than 90 resolutions on various global environmental issues.
It is time to lay political differences aside, time to focus on this little blue planet, that is teeming with life, and lift our sights to the common goal, securing a pathway to a future that is safe and sustainable.
The meeting of the world's highest environmental decision-making body comes at a time when there has been an increase in the effects of climate change, especially in Africa, despite the continent producing fewer carbon emissions than any other. Kenya is one of the countries still recovering from the effects of a deadly record drought in the Horn of Africa. The government says the assembly in Nairobi brings hope.
At this UNEA-6, we have the singular opportunity to inject optimism and restore faith in a strengthened global environmental governance system underpinned by science-based multilateral diplomacy.
International discussions on environmental issues are often influenced by political undertones that analysts say can impact such talks. With more than 60 countries, including the US, heading to the polls this year, environmentalists are bracing for wide-ranging outcomes. In a response to a VOA question during a news conference, the UNEP boss expressed her optimism in voters' decision.
I hope that when people go into the voting booth, that they will take the future with them in their heart and their grandchild or their daughter or son with them in their hand. Because when we vote, we're not just voting for today, we are also voting for tomorrow. And tomorrow is where the environment either is vibrant or not.
Environment leaders agree that UNEA-6 cannot solve the planet's environmental problems overnight. They are nevertheless hopeful that the Assembly will help focus minds and energies on finding solutions. Juma Majanga, VOA News, Kenya.
The Nigerian Labour Congress is leading nationwide protests on Tuesday over high cost of living. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja.
The soaring cost of living is the bone of contention that has attracted hundreds of people to this protest ground. The Nigerian Workers' Union called for the protests weeks after pockets of protests broke out across various Nigerian cities, demanding an end to the suffering. Nigeria's economy has been struggling for years, and last year, upon assuming office, President Bola Tinubu introduced economic reform policies in a bid to address the problem. Tinubu scrapped the expensive fuel subsidy payments and floated the country's currency, the naira. But the move shot up food and transportation costs, prompting hunger and resistance from the citizens.
We are here to let the government know, the president and his government, that Nigerians are hungry, Nigerians are suffering, Nigerians are dying, and that they should do something. And if they are sleeping, they should wake up to the suffering of this to the masses of this country.
Last month, Nigeria's inflation hit its highest mark in nearly 3 decades. Authorities say they are positive the economic reforms will succeed and want citizens to be more enduring. The labor union is warning that workers will be ordered to stay away from duty if the problem is not addressed.
We are facing insecurity challenges, increase in fuel price, foodstuffs, and all of those. So these are areas that are bothering us. I know that right now, staff, or let me say civil servants, are undue because what we are receiving cannot be up to what we need to buy in the market.
The protesters also accused the government of corruption and inefficiency and want the government to fix Nigeria's refineries that have been moribund. They say authorities are pandering to the International Monetary Fund and World Bank's policies without considering the effects on Nigerian citizens. Last week, Tinubu ordered the release of more than 102,000 metric tons of grains to lower food prices. And on Monday, Nigeria announced a cash transfer scheme to 12 million vulnerable households to cushion the hardship caused by the reform. But many here say unless that translates to anything tangible, they'd continue to struggle for life's most essential need, food. Timothy Obiezu, VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
2 people are dead in Guinea following unrest linked to a nationwide strike. The mother of an 18-year-old student told Reuters her son died after being shot in the chest near the capital, Conakry. A motorbike taxi driver was also shot and killed after clashes with security forces in another district, according to his father. Young men demonstrated in the streets to show their frustration with living conditions in the junta-led West African country. David Doyle has more.
Guinea's capital, Conakry, ground to a halt on Monday. Workers, including miners, beginning a nationwide strike in the world's second largest producer of bauxite, seeking higher wages and other demands. Conakry resident Lancenet Condé said the city had been brought to a standstill and that it was now up to the president to make a gesture.
Allow the unionists to come back to the table and discuss, because no one benefits from the country being paralyzed like this.
The Guinea Trade Union Movement, an umbrella group for multiple workers' unions, announced the general strike last week. It said the action would be indefinite and include the public, private and informal sectors. Demands include the lowering of food prices, the lifting of internet restrictions and the application of a wage deal reached with the government in November. The group also wants the Secretary-General of the Union of Press Professionals of Guinea to be released from jail. The West African country is run by a military junta that seized power in a 2021 coup. It has, in the past few years, quashed recurring anti-government protests, sometimes violently. Traders said alumina prices were trading higher in China due to the strike, but that the impact had been limited because of Chinese inventories of bauxite.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. Leaders of the economic community of West African states met over the weekend to address a political crisis in the coup-hit region that deepened in January with military-ruled Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali's decision to exit the 15-member bloc. ECOWAS President Omar Toure announced the lifting of sanctions against Niger as it seeks to set a new strategy for 3 junta-led countries from withdrawing from the economic and political union. For more perspective on the lifting of the sanctions, I'm joined live via Skype from here in Washington by Stephen Nabil Rogers, a public policy and African governance analyst. Stephen, welcome again to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me, Esther.
Now, what impact would the withdrawal of the 3 junta-led states have on ECOWAS?
Well, ECOWAS says the lifting of sanctions is purely on humanitarian grounds. That is true. But what is also true, Esther, is also that ECOWAS cannot just afford to have these member states leave the bloc and possibly form what is a counter-bloc to ECOWAS. Now, there are several implications. One, it will definitely undermine the regional integration that ECOWAS has put together. What does this mean? That this entanglement alone will cost trade and service flow within the region, which I think is up to the tune of about $150 billion. So ECOWAS cannot absolutely afford that. Secondly, it will affect the freedom of movement of citizens within the region. Now, these three countries alone, even though they are only three, they represent 10% of the region's GDP. Therefore, their departure in itself will constitute a reduction in the market size of ECOWAS. The third part is that it will affect security cooperation. Don't forget that Niger and some of these countries constitute the Sahel. With all what is going on in the Sahel, there has been a sharing of intelligence. And it's very important that these countries remain part of that bloc to be able to use that vital resource to fight the insurgents that is happening in some of those countries, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, as well as in Niger. The final one, and this is very important, it will threaten the viability of ECOWAS. Don't forget that there is a real feeling that there is a democratic backslide in that region. With this withdrawal, there is a likelihood that this in itself will create a counter to ECOWAS, and some of the countries within ECOWAS right now might find this as a solace in the event that ECOWAS is not kind of accommodating to some of their democratic tendencies. So it's important that
out of the three countries, Niger seemed to have kind of gotten a bit of favor here. The lifting of sanctions were kind of numerous. We didn't hear much about the other two countries. What do you think led ECOWAS to do this? Well, I mean, absolutely. When Niger had probably some of the most sanctions. And don't forget, there was even the likelihood of a military intervention to bring back President Bazoum. So when all of these sanctions were removed, the only condition that Niger was given was that President Bazoum be replaced. The important reason for that is that Niger has an outsized global impact. While its economic and social indicators in itself place it at the bottom of the global development indicators, in actual fact, its mineral resources, oil, and its potential for the development of renewable energies and its very strong demographic growth will explain its seemingly outsized interest. So there's a lot of interest in Niger, not only within the region of ECOWAS, but even outside the region. And you can see why there is this need. And the final part is Nigeria shares border with Niger. Any instability and destabilization in Niger in itself is going to have an impact on Nigeria. So obviously with Nigeria leading ECOWAS, you can see why there is an urgent need to be able to actually calm down the fears that's happening in the region, particularly in Niger. Stephen, very quickly, does the ECOWAS bloc have the, the capability to defeat the insurgents that are, playing a kind of very difficult role? They are messing around the countries of West Africa, especially in the Sahel region. ECOWAS does. You can't fight what is happening in the region right now. It's not just country-based, it's region-based. It's several countries. And all of these countries are linked both by tradition, by culture, by language, by families. The only way that can be minimized is through regional integration. And perhaps if there's any one bloc that has the probability of doing that, it's ECOWAS. They did that in Sierra Leone. They did that in Liberia by actually minimizing conflict and restoring democratic governance. So ECOWAS has a potential to do that. But to be able to do that, it has to be able to keep all of these countries on board. If it doesn't, then I'm very, very much afraid that ECOWAS will actually lose that capability. Stephen, thank you very much for your insight. Stephen B. Rogers is a public policy and African governance analyst. Still to come, we'll tell you what's being done to empower Africa's female politicians. We'll be right back.
This week on Straight Talk Africa. 2 years after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the war continues to pose a threat to global security. How is Moscow funding this war? Why is it spreading disinformation? We'll also look at how Moscow uses gold from Africa to fund its aggression. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield says Benin is offering 2,000 personnel members to support a planned Kenyan-led international force to help Haitian National Police fight armed gangs. The UN authorized the mission in October, 1 year after Haiti's unelected government requested it. Senegalese President Macky Sall says elections will be held before the rainy season begins around July. He also reiterated his commitment to leave office before his mandate ends in April. Sall had postponed the election while citing unresolved disputes over who could run, but the Constitutional Court struck down the delay as illegal. And former diplomat and U.S. Member of Congress Tom Perriello is being appointed as special envoy for Sudan as Washington seeks to bring an end to a war that has killed tens of thousands of people. Perriello says he will build on efforts of partners across Africa and the Middle East to bring an end to the conflict. There is a significant movement ongoing to empower African female politicians by providing them with the necessary skills to secure nominations, win elections, and take leadership roles within their parties. Masacheba Masemola Wamdaka, the Regional Programs Officer for Sub-Saharan Africa at Frederick Newman Foundation for Freedom, spoke to VOA's Paul Ndiho about the movement from Johannesburg, South Africa.
The model that we use as the Friedrich Naumann Foundation is that we don't consider ourselves a donor. We very much see the people we work with in country as our partners and supporting their roles in human rights defense, whether it is also in litigation, but also very much in advocacy. So in terms of our footprint, very much working in our different country offices as well, which I've mentioned before, around journalism, freedom of the media. We also work very much with human rights defenders across various topics. We've covered female genital mutilation. We've covered post-conflict war countries. We've covered also what the legal framework looks like in countries around the African Court on Human and People's Rights.
You do a lot of work with women, especially women who are trying to vie for office in different parts of Africa. How do you encourage or empower these women to take on the biggest challenge, a run for office?
So, I think a conversation that's been happening, at least for the better part of the last 15 years or so, has been around bringing women and their representation in the political space, but more so in leadership and decision making. We have, since 2019, supported the Women Leadership Program, which is looking at female representatives from liberal political parties in Africa, who then come together on a 3-part or 4-part session in a year, where they are basically given soft skills and also very much thematic skills, topical skills around how to go about their way of work. Where we've seen also with members of parliament, parliament is the legislative body of any government. This is where decisions are taken, and representation in parliament is where the power is actually held. So for us, this has really been something that we've seen ourselves taking a lead in, and obviously contributions from the African part and the women who have been part of this process at every cohort has been really remarkable.
You have a date now set in South Africa. Elections are coming up. I think May 29th. That's when people are likely to go vote for representatives. From talking to you, you just expressed how you're helping a lot of women. Are you planning to do that for women parliamentarians or for women legislators around the country in South Africa?
Definitely these elections celebrating 30 years of South Africa's democracy, real democracy, and the challenges that we faced up until now. But as we think about the elections and support of what that looks like for engaging youth especially, I think voter apathy is something that is not just a South African phenomenon, but it's everywhere across the African continent. We actually are running a series where we will be having mayoral candidates or premier candidates that will be having debates in different provinces. And this is also where we are going to see, obviously, there's a candidate list, so that is already prescribed. But of course, when it comes to what it looks like for young women and also youth participation, we very much are wanting to engage on various digital platforms to make sure that reach is definitely there, to enable that whatever vibrant democracy you want to see post the election date of 29th is basically the mirror of the will of the people of South Africa.
That was Masechaba Masemola Wamdaka speaking to VOA's Paul Ndiho. It's time for our health segment, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with a look at heart disease. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. February is Heart Health Month and Black History Month. Cardiovascular diseases are the #1 cause of death worldwide, and over 75% of cardiovascular disease deaths occur in low and middle income countries, according to the World Health Organization. Dr. Amina Jafar, Senior Registrar at the Cardiology Unit of the Federal Medical Center in Abuja, Nigeria, talks about the impact of heart disease.
Generally, the cardiovascular diseases account for a large proportion of mortality or death in African population. So a lot of studies have been done on genetic predisposition of heart diseases in African population. And it's been found that we have some certain inborn genetic factors that predispose Africans to certain cardiovascular diseases, particularly cardiomyopathies, followed by other genetic hereditary conditions. Hypertension also has a hereditary role to play. That being said, environmental factors play a huge role and contribute to these risk factors that are already inborn.
That was Dr. Amina Jafar, Senior Registrar at the Cardiology Unit of the Federal Medical Center in Abuja, Nigeria. Now, achieving universal health coverage is one of the targets set by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Universal health coverage will enable all people to have access to the full range of health services they need, including prevention, treatment, and rehabilitative care without suffering financial hardship. The conference is ongoing in Abuja, Nigeria until March 1st to discuss how the first sector is contributing in helping communities and individuals access universal health care. For more perspective, I'm joined by Dr. Dennis Chirian, the Associate Vice President for Health, Nutrition, Water, Sanitation and Hygiene, WASH, for Chorus International. He's attending the conference in Abuja. Dr. Chirian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's good to be with you.
So this is the 11th biennial conference of ACHAP. What are some of the key highlights on the agenda?
Well, the agenda, obviously the goal of the conference is to learn from how are we advancing universal healthcare and what is the role of faith-based organizations. Obviously, it is looking at how do we take policy into practice, how do we address health equity issues, supply chain issues, and build resilient health systems. But most importantly, also looking at localization and how do you work with local partners, strengthen their capacity and equip them to address universal health coverage for all.
So what does universal health coverage looks like for a person who lives in low and middle income country versus someone in the developed country?
Well, it means that everybody has access to healthcare wherever they are, irrespective of their state they live in, for which it means there is equitable healthcare, and the out-of-pocket expenses that burden almost all families are addressed through equitable means, and everybody can have equitable access to healthcare. It also means that people who live in the most fragile context, unreached, and those who are missed have access to healthcare, where health is a universal right, and where you live and your geography or the context you live in is not a barrier for you to access healthcare. That means that there needs to be improved quality of healthcare, access to healthcare, and they can prevent illnesses. So it is a universal concept that reaches the unreached.
And Dr. Cherian, how would you describe the contribution of the faith-based sector on the journey towards universal health coverage?
Faith-based organizations offer a lot in terms of healthcare. For example, we did a survey across Africa and looked at 22 countries. And we found that roughly 9,000 healthcare facilities are operated by faith-based organizations. In some cases as large as 50% of healthcare services offered by faith-based organizations. They include referral hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, teaching hospitals, etc. So their role in terms of offering patient-centered or client-centered healthcare is very critical. Not more. Also equally important is the compassionate care that is most critical if we are to achieve universal health coverage. But also, as you know, faith-based organizations operate in the most hard-to-reach context where the workers are committed to what they do, and they often live in security in insecure areas. So the contributions of faith-based organizations are unquestionable, especially in terms of ensuring equitable access to healthcare and healthcare that is respectful.
Briefly, how does primary healthcare, which is so essential, contribute to the big picture of universal health coverage?
The World Health Organization states that universal health basics or the foundations of healthcare. And so investing in primary healthcare is the most important and the most optimal and the best investment, which ensures that there is equitable access to healthcare, that demand-side barriers are addressed, and there is a multi-sectoral approach, which means we are looking beyond health, looking at other sectors and partnerships that are important to advance universal health.
Great. We have to leave it there, Dr. Cherian. Thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Dennis Cherian is the Associate Vice President for Health, Nutrition, Water, Sanitation, Hygiene for Chorus International. That's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, @Linokhmudu. Esther?
Thank you very much, Lino, for that health report. Be sure to join Lino Mudu's health report every Tuesday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.